Oh, that's fine.
Oh,
Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to Trust the Process. Today we have a guest on the show, a special guest, um, Gabrielle. She's been on the show before, and I was going to mention what we talked about, but I'm going to be honest, I can't even remember. I feel like it was probably something to do with like feminine energies, working in tune with your energies, things like that. But anyway, we decided to have a bit of an impromptu, spontaneous call today. So I introduced her last time, but I'll just let you introduce yourself this time, Gabrielle, because I feel like we've definitely both had some shifts when it comes to the coaching industry, the world that we find ourselves in, what we kind of identify with in terms of coaching and things like that. So I'd love to hear where you're at with that and how you would kind of present yourself now, I guess.
yeah, I love that. And I was literally thinking earlier as well about how our last podcast episode, it feels like it was ages ago and I can't remember what we spoke about. But yeah, I agree with you that I feel like we've definitely kind of evolved as people since the first podcast episode we did together. So I love that. And in terms of describing myself, I always struggle with this. Because I don't like to fit myself into categories or like boxes,
Mm,
being like
yeah.
this, give myself labels in that sense. But the way I have to describe myself to people, I just say I'm very passionate about female empowerment, but not female empowerment from the modern, like feminism perspective that we see it now. A lot more about just connecting back with your core feminine essence and returning back to your feminine power that I feel like society doesn't want us to do, if that makes sense. So I guess I try and use my voice and platform on Instagram for that, and sharing that. And I wouldn't necessarily describe myself as a coach per se, especially not now. I guess just an advocate for women,
Mm,
someone to hopefully, with the content and stuff that I share, I really hope that people see it and it gives them an opportunity to reflect and think about their own relationship with themselves, like their bodies, their energies, their, feminine essence, all that kind of stuff. And, it just gives them an opportunity to kind of reflect and work on their own journeys and things like that.
mm.
And also I love talking about periods and our menstrual cycle as well. I'm big on menstrual positivity. So yeah, I don't know if that kind of
Yeah,
explains,
definitely.
but yeah, just
Well, I
at the
love
core,
that.
very much feminine empowerment.
I love that because I feel like when you kind of put yourself in a box, like when you start to label yourself, I find it especially interesting because I think like in the world that we're in, which is all kind of like wellnessy, personal development, all of that kind of stuff, it often talks about unidentifying with things and getting out of labels and things like that. But you can kind of end up finding yourself in another box. And as soon as you decide like, oh, I'm a coach or I want to be a coach, because like you want to help empower people, you want to share your own journey, you want to help people understand that like they can take control of their own, whether it's health, mental well-being, emotional regulation, nervous system, whatever. You think that you can start coaching people, and then you kind of label yourself as a coach, and then you don't realize it, but you're putting so many restrictions on yourself, and you kind of give yourself the label before you've actually found out what it is that you want to do. And then you find yourself
Mm-hmm.
changing it. You're like, oh, well, I was a empowerment coach, but now I'm into kind of like menstrual cycles and menstrual health. But am
Mm-hmm.
I like a period coach? Like, what am I? And then you kind of have to fit everything around that label rather than just like destroying it completely and like opening yourself up to so many things as well, because you can empower people without necessarily coaching them as well. And I think
Mm-hmm.
just being open to
Yeah,
that. So
yeah,
that's really cool to
100%.
see.
100%.
Um, so we just went straight in there with the talking about periods, talking about feminism. I love that. So that's definitely something that I wanted to talk about today because I feel like maybe in our last podcast episode as well, I think by that time, like both of us had definitely like unidentified with the term feminism and feminist, and we definitely like didn't resonate with that. But I think we were maybe less vocal about it, and we were maybe
Mm.
more, maybe there was some fear there, even if it doesn't feel like it, or even if we didn't realize it at the time, that we were kind of afraid to express, because it seems so controversial, it seems so against the norm, and it's basically very like anti-narrative and anti what we're fed at the moment. So I would love to hear
100%.
what kind of like planted the seed of your journey of like exiting the feminist agenda, because that's what it
Yeah.
is at the end of the day. And then I think maybe like we can go on to talking about what that agenda actually is and how to maybe help people decide if that actually resonates with them or not.
Yeah, I love what you said about agenda, and you literally just said like let's talk about that later. So definitely we'll talk about that later. What something just popped into my head, but I can't remember what it was. It was about oh yeah, the fear kind of thing about like speaking out about this and going against the grain and against the narrative. And I think it's huge because like obviously we're women, so surely as women we should be feminists. Surely as women we should support that and stuff. And I think that's what a lot of people expect as women, like, you know, we must be feminists and stuff. But it's just like, no, that's not necessarily the case. And it doesn't necessarily mean we're not, you know, by not identifying as feminists, it doesn't mean that we're not for equality and equal rights and all that kind of stuff. It's more the, I guess the modern feminist agenda, that word again, that I'm very much not a fan of. And that's something that I'm very much like detaching myself from. And when I think back to, you know, myself when I was in college and early years of uni, I would have identified as a feminist. But I think even then, I probably didn't fully really know what it meant to identify as a feminist, if that makes sense, and really identify as feminist perspectives and feminists like narratives and agendas and stuff. I think it was just one of those things that you kind of almost hop onto the bandwagon of. And again, because you're a woman, it's just like, yeah, I'm a feminist and things like that. Like, we should all be feminists, blah, blah, blah. But when you really like just look into it properly and kind of peel back the layers of it and I feel like insidious is quite a strong word. But like when you peel back these things back and realize actually the damage that it is doing, that's when it's like, okay, this isn't what we've been made out for it to be. And I think things like, you know, social media and the media are very, very powerful in pushing like, you know, feminism and being like, whoa, like let's be feminists, we're all feminists, all supportive of this, blah blah blah. You know, all these cute infographics and illustrations and all this kind of stuff that we see on social media, and it's like, yes, like I support that, I'm all for that, blah blah. But I just think when you, again, like I said, when you really get into it and like peel everything back, it's just a bit like, no. And it's not as empowering as we've been made out to be convinced that it is, you know?
Yeah. And I think like a massive part of that is because so much of it is actually like tied in with the thing that they're supposedly trying to fight against, which is the patriarchy. And like without going into too much a rabbit hole of that, because there's arguments that you could argue, like, does that even exist? Did feminism create it? You know, does it exist or not? It doesn't really matter, but it's like you end up becoming the thing that you loathe. And I think like I've especially learned that recently, like doing my yoga studies, is how like when we become like so passionate about any cause, even if it starts off like pure and well-intentioned, we end up like identifying with that to such a extreme level that we truly believe that our sense of self is intrinsically like ingrained into that thing. And there's no possible way that it could be, because it's something that's been created, even if it was a good thing. And I think so many feminists now, without again putting blame on them, because it's not necessarily their fault, but like I do feel like so many feminists now are on this like man hating agenda, and it's not helping them. Even if you look at it at like a very core level, what's that doing to your nervous system? It's creating stress in your body, it's creating fear in your body, it's not helping you think rationally, and it's not helping you try to change a problem. So even if these things are true, the way that you're approaching it is just unhelpful. And I think I'm really at a time in my life now with so much of what I see on social media, so many people, like, especially now with everything that's going on in the world, like sat on their sofas, like posting stuff, like I call it armchair politics, like they have a clue about what's going on in the world. And I think that's a whole other tangent that I could go into. But what was I even saying? I don't remember. Oh yeah, but I feel like that's kind of what ends up happening with
Yeah.
feminism, especially
Yeah.
since if you kind of come out and say like, oh, you know what, deep down my values are the same as they've always been, but I just don't identify with the term feminist anymore. Maybe if feminism was what it was when it was originally created, I would still identify with that term, but just the way that it's played out now, and who knows, I'm open, like maybe my views will change, maybe something will prove to me otherwise, maybe one day in the future I will be a feminist again, and that's okay. But to say like right now that doesn't resonate with me, and I think like a lot of the time that is met with so much backlash, and I find that so interesting and ironic coming from a community that's supposedly tolerant and specifically that wants to empower women, but it doesn't allow women to think differently to them. And
Yeah.
if they do, they want to change their opinion and they don't welcome it, and they don't welcome different sides, you know?
Yeah, I literally love everything that you said. And one thing that I was going to say from what you said earlier about, I guess, when people get so sucked into this thing, this fight, whatever it is that you want to call it, that they're like fighting for and stuff, like you said, it can affect their nervous system and it can put stress on them without them even realizing. Because I don't know, like the let's say the really let's say like strong feminists, right, in this like feminist fight, I don't know, I imagine them being, I don't want to use the word keyboard warriors, but you know what I mean, like
A
putting
little
a
bit.
lot of energy, but a
Yeah.
little bit, putting so much of their energy
Yeah,
into this
yeah.
stuff
They're
out there,
precious
especially with
energy.
social media. Yeah, and it's like on an energetic level as well, that is draining, that must be draining so much of your energy. And I feel like when you're so absorbed in it, you're actually not aware of how much it is draining you until I think you step back and you're like, wow, okay, like I'm putting too much of my stuff out there. And you need, that's where you need to kind of set boundaries with what it is that you're doing and what it is that you're fighting for. And I think obviously it's, you know, good to fight for a cause and fight for worthy causes and stuff like this, but I just think when it gets to the point where it's too far, where I think a lot of these extreme feminists that say it's just, you need to lean back a little bit and just reflect on how this is actually making you feel. And
So
like you said
true.
as well about nowadays with, you know, social media and the media, there's just so much out there where it's so easy for you to get absorbed into and just continue scrolling and like clicking on and all this kind of stuff. Again, that in itself, like scrolling for hours on social media is another energy drain. And so all these things, it's just not exactly having a it's not exactly going to have the most positive effect on you, you know.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like a lot of the time these people don't realize, because they probably do have like, I'm not saying they don't have a life outside of social media, like they probably do, they probably have like a thriving life, like they're doing stuff and whatever, but I think just because you have a life outside of what you're posting, that doesn't mean that what you're consuming isn't draining you. Like you could be consuming stuff for an hour a day and be more drained than someone who's consuming stuff for their job for 5 hours a day, because they know how to put those boundaries on. And I think that a lot of it as well, like you were saying, like what is that doing to you? And I think like you said, it can go to the very extreme. And it's also interesting to me how a lot of people who now have the views that we have, who are like in their kind of mid-20s, same age as us, they're people that used to have those extreme views, whether they were like extreme kind of like, what do they call it, like Nazi feminists or whatever, or whether they were like
Feminazi.
feminazi. Yeah, I was like Nazi feminist, that's not it, feminazi.
I literally once got called that when I'm in college, you know, someone actually called me that.
No, this is a full circle moment, I'm so proud. Oh my god, I hope they listen to this. But it's so funny because they would probably listen to this and be like, oh, that's just extreme as well. But it's like, well, no. But yeah, or whether it's like being, I don't know, like raw vegan, only eating like a specific, or on the opposite end as well, like being a carnivore, being so like identified with the carnivore diet, the lion diet, only eating meat, like things like that. And I think a lot of the time as well, it can come from a place of, oh, well, this has helped me. Like going to that, for example, I know of a lot of people who eat like a so-called lion's diet, which is literally just like red meat and salt and water, I think. And like it works for them and they're so passionate about it because they had like a chronic illness or like an autoimmune disease or something, and it helped them at a time when, like, I don't know, like mainstream medical systems doctors weren't listening, they weren't getting their medical help they needed. And now they're so passionate about that because it helped them, but then they go to the other extreme where they're so identified with it just because it got them out of this like terrible time in their life, but they'll go to the point of like defending it to the ends of the earth, as if a diet has a personality, like it's asking to be defended, like it's just food. You know what I mean? And I think it just
Yeah.
it kind of shows how politicized everything is
Yeah.
becoming. And like, you're either this or you're that. You're either a feminist, you're either with us or you're against us. Do you know what I
Mm.
mean? And it takes out so much nuance from these debates. And
Mm-hmm.
sadly, that's what ends up deterring people, because like we could have this same conversation and still consider ourselves feminists. It just so
Mm-hmm.
happens that we don't. But I feel like if we did, I would hope that the way we talk would like invite people who maybe didn't share the same opinions as us, especially
Mm-hmm.
men, because isn't that like the whole point of feminism? Like, you want to be equal to men, you
Mm-hmm.
want to have equal rights, you want men to listen to you, you want to like bring them on board, but like, are you really doing it? Are you really inviting them to come on board? And I think like a big argument that I hear around that as well is like, yeah, well, it's them who should be doing the work. And it's
Don't
like,
even, yeah, don't.
but it's like, even if that's true, and even if
Mm-hmm.
everything was the fault of men, let's say that that's true. If that's true, then that's still not their fault.
Mm-hmm.
That it just so happens that society was constructed that way. And so if you don't, what good does harboring a deep resentment and bitterness and anger towards them, when the point is
Mm-hmm.
it's not them, it's the society that created us.
Yeah. And I think
So
yeah,
exactly,
yeah.
yeah,
And I think holding on to that bitterness and resentment and stuff, that's literally gonna get you nowhere. But like, I
exactly.
think there are so many women out there who have that resentment. Maybe it isn't to men, it's to like, the patriarchy and these like bigger systems and stuff. But it seems that women do point the finger and be like, yeah, men, and they group men together as if it's
Mm.
like everyone. But it's just like, no, that is very much not the case. And I always think to myself, like, how does that make men feel? Hearing these women talk about men in such a way, how is that going to make these men feel? Like, because I'm sure that it's not going to make them feel empowered and like positive in themselves.
Mm.
And it reminds me of something that I saw on Jake Woodard. We're like his biggest fan.
Shout out.
I saw on his most recent post, I think it was from yesterday, the one that you shared on your story as well. There were so many comments from women saying all this kind of stuff, and it was like, but men, and like, men
Mm.
need to be the one to do this, men need to be the one to do that. And I'm not saying like, no, they haven't got anything to do, like they're all perfect and stuff. No, we both like, men and women have things that we can work on and work through. And I think the reality is that we as women, it's our duty to first heal our own wounds first,
Mm.
and our own distrust in men and the masculine, because otherwise, if we're holding on to this resentment and this pain and this lack of trust, how
Mm.
are we ever going to allow men to step into their own masculine energy and allow them to flourish as men? Like, we're
Exactly.
not. And it reminds me of this book that I was reading the other week, and it was about like stepping into your feminine energy and femininity and stuff. And it spoke about the similar sense of the fact that women need to be the one first to step up to do the work, so they inspire the men to step up and do the work themselves.
Mm. Yeah, it's like, shouldn't you be embodying an example of what you want others to do
Mm-hmm.
instead of don't do as I do as I tell you?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
And
It's
also,
like the difference between that. It's like you can choose either be the change you want to see or don't do as I tell you. And it's that simple. Like you make the
mm-hmm.
choice.
Mm-hmm. And also, I feel like for a lot of women, it's a case of like, oh, we have to suffer. We've suffered for
Mm,
so long, for so many years, and now men can suffer, or and now it's not, it can't be easy for men. It's like there's this pain and this resentment that so many women are holding on to, for so many years and so long. But it's just like you're literally gonna get yourself nowhere. You're gonna get
exactly.
yourself nowhere for holding on to that. And I think, the first, like I said, the first step to that is healing that pain and
Mm,
acknowledging that pain and working through it. And,
yeah.
I think for some women it might be difficult and they might do it very like reluctantly and stuff, but it's just like you you cannot expect to enjoy your life, enjoy your relationships, have flourishing relationships if you're holding on to this like
Yeah,
resentment and pain. and
exactly.
and I think a lot of, it's easy for a lot of women to kind of think, oh yeah, like, we're all perfect, like we have to like deal with all this kind of stuff every day, like it sucks to be a woman, it's so hard to exist as a woman. And I think that's, it's very much, it's like, that victim mindset and victim mentality, and it's kind of like, oh, we have to suffer so men can suffer,
Mm,
or men have it easier than us. And it's just like,
exactly.
you need to stop comparing
Mm,
yourself. You need to completely stop comparing yourself, because the reality is you will never know what it's like to exist as a male in today's society. So you have no right to actually kind of, say what it's like to exist as a man, and say what it's like if they don't have struggles and all this kind of stuff. Because, I'm sure they have a lot of struggles, and struggles that they actually struggle to open up about, because we all know
mm,
about, the reality of men's mental health and things
mm,
like that,
mm,
and
yeah.
men struggling to open up and things like that.
Yeah,
But,
it's so
and
true.
as women, we often, I guess, we have more of that community and like close friendship with, our sisters and our girlfriends and things like that. But for men, I don't, obviously I don't know what it's like and stuff, but I feel like it's obviously very, very different.
Yeah, definitely. And I just think the irony of that is that like feminism is supposed to, or a lot of the arguments of like, oh, well, the definition of feminism is actually equality for all. And like you see in some of these, and I don't want to judge and like make too many assumptions, but it's just how I perceive it is like you see these like feminists posting all of these statistics and all of this stuff that's obviously so like needs such a specific context to be like properly like unraveled and understood. And then like occasionally they'll just like throw in a statistic about men, and I'm not
Mm-hmm.
saying that they don't care, like they probably do, like they obviously do care about men's mental health and things like that. But like, do you think that like just you throwing that statistic about, oh, and 1 in 4 men kill themselves,
Mm-hmm.
how does that help? Like we know that now. Like how
Mm-hmm.
does just throwing that statistic in there help? If anything, it's kind of a bit, to me, even if it is done with good intentions, it's a bit dehumanizing and a bit condescending to say like, well, our problems are worse than yours. And I think like
Mm-hmm.
I always come to this thing of like, even if this is true, because it's like there I accept that like the way I think could be completely wrong, even though it's just opinion anyway. Even if all of this stuff is true, that, and say women had it statistically factually 10 times worse than men, like just say, let's just say that was a true, an objective truth, that doesn't mean that we should care more about the 10 things that women experience that are bad than the one thing that the man experiences that is bad. That's true equality. It's not saying,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but we still have 10 things. It's about viewing
Mm-hmm.
each of those things equally and treating them the same as if the statistic was reversed, and if it was 10 times worse for men than it is for women. Do you know
Mm-hmm.
what I
Yeah,
mean?
I love that. Yeah, I love that point.
um so I would love to talk more about like, because you mentioned a few different things in there, but first of all, this idea of masculinity and femininity, which I don't really remember what you said, but I just heard the word, so I was like, okay, yeah, we need to talk about that. So we've spoken about this so much in private before, so I'm just gonna give the mic to you. Like, what is your opinion on that? Like, how do you think we have kind of maybe strayed away from our innate masculine and feminine qualities? What do these things actually mean? Because I think a lot of the time it's misunderstood, and a lot of people don't really understand what it means to have masculine and feminine qualities. So maybe like debunking some of the myths and some of the things that deter people from our way of thinking, and maybe like opening it up a bit.
I feel like there's a lot that I can say. I'm going to try and make it as coherent as possible. But the first thing that I say to people, especially people who have never like heard about these terms before, is the fact that when we talk about masculine and feminine energy, it is nothing to do with gender at all. So anything that you know and think about gender nowadays, just like put it out of your mind, because this isn't it. Like, you know, the idea of masculine and feminine energy has been around for thousands of years, and the traits you could say that the energies represent are inspired by ancient and cultural traditions from like you know thousands of years ago. And you know, if you don't like acknowledging it as masculine or feminine energy, you can acknowledge it as like yang, which is masculine, and yin energy. That's how they describe it in Chinese medicine understanding and stuff. But the core and at a very, very basic level, the feminine energy is about like being in a receptive state, and the masculine is about doing and taking action and kind of being outward, and it is very much outward energy, whereas feminine is very inward energy. And we all have masculine and feminine energy inside of us, like the yin and the yang, and it's important that we have a balance of the two energies. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to have like a 50-50 balance of these two inside. It's more you kind of know what balance works for you, if that makes sense. Like, as generally we have a core energy, and again, it's not necessarily linked to gender, but most women will have feminine cores and most men have masculine cores. And by that, what I mean is, I guess women literally thrive and feel their best when they are honoring their feminine energy, however that looks to them, and same with men and their masculine energy. So you know, so like for example, take a woman with a feminine core. If she is so heavily in her masculine energy, maybe that's because she's working like in a corporate job 9 till 5, working 40 hours a week. Obviously that's very, very much in the yang, the masculine energy. And if she doesn't make time to nourish her feminine energy, nourish her yin energy, whether that's through, you know, like slow movement practices, through dancing, through connecting with her femininity, through her sensuality, so many ways you can tap into your feminine energy. If she's not honoring that, and also honoring her body, and you know, listening to her body and her cycle, but that's like a whole other thing. If she's not like honoring that, and she's far too leaning too heavily in her masculine energy, then she's more likely to experience burnout. She's more likely to, you know, feel tense and pain in her body, because she's not kind of there's a lack of balance there, if that makes sense. And then like on the other hand, you know, men with masculine core energies, they thrive when they have like projects to work on, when they have things to do, people to serve, you know, things to work towards. And if they don't have that, if they are kind of lacking in that, they might find themselves a little bit lost, a little bit like lacking much structure, and feeling kind of I guess maybe you could say uninspired. And one thing that I could say a lot about is how I think today there is such it's backwards, and it's so reversed, in the sense that so many women are like heavily in their masculine energies, and so many men are heavily in their feminine energies, and there's like a complete reversal. And you know, there are many reasons or potential reasons for this, but I do think that, you know, with modern feminism, I do think that actually is causing a lot of these imbalances, because, you know, things like, again, the fight for equality, the fight for women being in male spaces, women working to the same standards of men and being like able to prove themselves, that's very much in the doing, and that's very much in the masculine and the, you know, fighting and working. And I'm not saying women can't work to the same levels of men. I'm not saying they can't be in the same spaces as men, but on a biological and energetic level, you know, there are some, it's questionable, and there's a lot you can kind of go into about how we're literally biologically not wired to work the exact same standards of men every single day, and that is okay. But I think there's this confusion where we've been made to feel like we have to work like men and stuff, and I think that's what's causing so many women to be in their masculine energy, like, by almost, I don't want to use the word too much, or like too leaning too heavy in one way, but almost they're very far leaning into their masculine energy and not making time for their feminine energy. So then when it comes to like relationships, you know, if there are women who are in their masculine energy all the time, they're not gonna, so if they're in a relationship with a guy, the guy's not going to be able to come in and bring his masculine energy because she's heavily in her masculine energy, and you can't have the same energies, because obviously that's when, like,
they clash.
That's when they clash. And so if there's no space for the man to be in his masculine energy, what's going to happen is he's going to just be lean back and to lean in his feminine energy. So there are those opposites there. And I hear it so many times, like, especially when I'm at work, and because I work at like music venues and events venues, and I see, you know, people in relationships, and the women are so often the ones like leading the man. And even as simple as like they have the tickets, they have things organized and get it all done, and I feel like I see it so many times where the guys are just kind of following along with their partners. And I think that's such a simple example of these women taking the lead. And I think part of that comes from the lack of trust in the men, because they'll be like, oh, he's not going to do it, so I'll just get it done. And it's just like, hun, if you lean back and maybe actually say to him, I would really love it if you could be the one to organize this. Like, can you do that? Can you do that? You're literally allowing him space to step into his masculine. But if you're not going to allow that, then, you know?
Yeah, like it's like we were saying before, like, do you want to embody that change? And if there's a reason that you don't trust it, and if you feel like that lack of trust is valid, then completely fair enough. But why do you want to keep perpetrating that, is it? Or perpetuating that? Why do you want to keep perpetuating that? Do you know what I mean? So I think it's so interesting as well, because like you said, it has nothing to do with gender in its core, although you can end up like relating it to that. And it often gets related to that when things are out of balance with like the natural order of things. Because if things are just in their natural order, then it doesn't have anything to do with gender. But you bring like gender into it when you see all of these energies just out of balance, and like, hang on, what is this world we're living in? And I think as well, like, in the same way that it has nothing to do with gender, it has nothing to do with like what people are doing with their lives, what women are doing, how women are spending their days, how men are spending their days. Like, I actually get like a fair few people replying to my stories when I share stuff of Jake and his wife Melissa's, that, you know, people give kind of like caveats saying like, oh, but what about women in, I don't know, predominant, for example, a job like nursing, like that is predominantly female orientated. Like, what are you saying? Women shouldn't be nurses? Are you saying this, that, and the other? And it's like, first of all, the whole point is that we need to be kind of like attacking this from like a societal level and saying like, why are these women feeling so burnt out? Why are they being pushed to their max? And not just why, but what's the agenda behind it? Which in our view is that you want to take women away from like their core essential selves, and ultimately just make everyone a slave to this like hustle culture, narrow-minded, just like sleepwalking brainwash system, because you're easier to control, you're easier to manipulate, you're easier to just follow the status quo. That's a whole tangent, but if you can't see the links between that, then like you've got so much work to do. That I was watching someone's story today, and someone had asked, she was doing like a question and answer thing, and she's kind of like very promotes like traditional living and things like that, and connecting women and men back to their masculine and feminine energies. and she did like an ask me anything question box, and someone asked her like, how do I connect back to my feminine energy? And her answer, like, I was even expecting her maybe to say something a bit more controversial or very traditional, but she was like, connect to your creativity, try to do things that are going to open up your third eye, open up your intuition center, take deep breaths before you make a decision, try and lean into self-trust, try think before you speak, like all of these really small little things that you can implement in any area of your life. You can implement in that in your job, you can implement that in your relationships, in your me time, in your meditation, like literally while you're going about your daily tasks. And I would encourage anyone, like, if this triggers you, which is a good thing if it triggers you, like some of it still triggers me, to be perfectly honest, like, but I think like if any of this kind of stuff triggers you, I would really invite you to like just try infusing some of these more yin feminine, like you said, you don't have to see it as feminine female, you can see it as yin, you can even just see it as like slow nurturing surrendering qualities. Try and infuse these things into really simple daily tasks that you already do. So
Yeah.
like when you're, even men, if you're listening, try and do it, and you'll notice how that puts you into more of an open receiving state, which men obviously need to feel
Yeah.
as well. But it's
Yeah.
just that I feel like women are so disconnected from that, and then it
Yeah.
creates that
So
cycle
true.
of men feeling, becoming passive, and like,
Yeah.
I don't really like the
100%.
word soft, but that's like, I guess you could
Yeah.
use that. But like just
Yeah.
try it, like when you're cooking, instead of, I don't know, instead of watching something mindlessly while you're cooking, instead of just waiting till you're literally starving and then like frustratedly like chopping things up and chucking them in the pan, sit with yourself and ask yourself like, okay, like I've got, make it a ritual. Literally all you have to do is add 15 minutes, like open up your cupboard, say like, what do I really want to eat? Like, what does my body want? Put on some like slow jazz music, whatever, like dance, move your hips while you're cooking. And like, I promise you the food will taste better. Like my
Yeah.
boyfriend Carlos, like he can literally tell when, well, my food is always made with love, but he can tell when it's like infused with like this like energy of just like surrender
Energy.
and giving.
Yeah. Yeah. I love
And
that so much.
he can tell when it's like got kind of an irritated energy behind it, like, and oftentimes when it's that, he doesn't enjoy it and he doesn't even want to eat it, and I don't blame
I
him,
love
because
that
like,
so much.
and it just, even that, you know, to even just go on that example, like that all of these things affect us on like a physiological level, that will affect how you digest your food, that will affect how present you feel, all of this kind of stuff. So if you just try it with something like so simple, you will just see in the
Something you do
evidence
every day as
how
well.
much better you feel. And then when
Yeah.
you need to embody your masculine energy, you'll be able to do that with so much more ease, because you're doing it in times when you need it and you've got that reserve. You haven't been like just running on empty and just using all of
Yeah.
this masculine forceful energy when you should be in your surrendered and open
Yeah.
state.
I love that so much. I love the word infuse as well that you use, because it just highlights how you don't have to make it like a structured thing, in the sense of like,
Mm,
okay, every evening at this time I'm gonna meditate, or I'm gonna do this so that I'm in my feminine energy, because I feel like
mm.
that kind of contradicts the whole thing.
Yeah, it's
And
a
I
very
think it should be a
masculine
lot
approach
more.
to it.
Yeah, like it should be a lot more like flow and trusting and following your intuition with what it is that you want to do. So like, I feel like it's good to have a few different options and ideas of things that allow you to be in that feminine energy, whether it is, I don't know, doing some coloring or meditating, or having a dance or cooking your food while being present. All these kind of things, I think it's good to have almost like in the toolbox in your head, of ways in which you can bring that feminine energy into your day. But I think it's really important to do it with the intention,
Mm.
but also making it fun and enjoyable, not a sense of like, oh, right, okay, I've got to be my feminine energy today, so let's
Yeah,
do this, because
exactly.
that just like takes the whole thing away.
Yeah.
um but I love what you said as well about, it was along the lines of like coming back to yourselves and your power, and you mentioned it before about like women connecting back to themselves, but I think you said it as well just before when you were talking about the cooking thing. I can't remember exactly what, but it made me think about how powerful women are when they do connect back with their selves. And when I say selves, I don't just mean like self, I just mean connecting back to like every part of themselves, like their energy,
Yeah.
their body, like everything. And I think, you know, you become so powerful because I don't know how to describe it. I feel like you become so much more like open and free and authentic, and like taking no shit, and like setting boundaries, and all these kind of like powerful stuff which makes you literally
Mm,
magnetizing. and
absolutely.
and I think that, because when you said about it, when you mentioned it, you talked about how like society doesn't want that, and it's like literally so true. And I feel like this is why there are so many things out there which try to make women disconnect from themselves, whether it is through like, you know, feminism and the feminist agenda, or like 9 to 5 jobs, or even things like the birth control pill, which literally
Mm,
changes like women's bodies and like the way that they live and exist every day. And so that's why I think a lot of you know, the stuff that I share and a lot of my content and stuff is to, you know, empower women and give them a permission slip to literally connect back with their self.
mm,
And another thing that you said, you use the word surrender, which I love, because I was thinking about this word the other day, and how important it is as women when you're in your feminine energy to surrender, especially surrender to the masculine, and allow the masculine to lead.
mm.
And it reminds me of when I was doing salsa last week, which I literally keep talking about it. I talk about salsa every single day, and I'm so excited because I'm going again tomorrow. But it was so much fun, and it really taught me a lesson in surrendering and allowing the masculine to lead, because in, you know, the dances, the man is the leader and the woman is the follower. And it's so important that as the woman you literally just flow and allow the man to like guide you during the dance. And if you resist it, and if you try to be the one to control it, then that's where you're going to lose the fluidity, and that's where it's going to be a little bit messy. And
Mm,
I thought it was such a beautiful lesson. And I was thinking about the word surrender, and I feel like how a lot of women struggle to like kind of get on board of that word, because I think
yeah.
it has connotations of like giving up and maybe like feeling weak and stuff. And like women, we can't be weak. Like, you know, we have to be strong, like girl power, things like that.
Mm,
But the way that I see, you know, surrendering is, it literally is just releasing control and allowing someone else to lead. And
yeah.
that in itself is like, you know, I feel like you can just sigh a massive sigh of release when you
Yeah.
literally just like let go of control.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you can even relate this not just to, because I if say for example you're listening to this and you just can't get on board with this idea of like relating this to men and women. You can relate this to your own energies within yourself. When
Mm-hmm.
you're more open, when you're more receptive, when you lean back, when you stop trying to force an outcome and like take control over the wheel, over like the all-consuming power of the universe that you obviously can't control, that's when more opportunities come to you. That's when your manifestations come to you. And the things that come to you are the more masculine things. So when you're
Mm-hmm.
leaning back in your own energy, you invite all of those masculine things in, and that you're
Mm-hmm.
then able to act on that with that masculine energy with
Yeah.
so much more ease. And you
Yeah.
can create a much more easy and flowy dance. And when you work in alignment with those energies, whether it's like in your job, your relationships, your creativity, even in the days when you feel like uninspired or unmotivated to do the things that you want to do or that you have to do, when you're working in alignment with those energies, the second that you get down and start doing it, it just flows. Like it
Mm-hmm.
just flows because I relate it a lot to the elements as well. It's like the sun and the moon, like the
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
sunrise and the sunset. It's like
Mm-hmm.
when the moon is out, like the moon is literally the yin energy.
Mm-hmm.
Like the
Yeah.
moon is the energy that kind of watches over the night. This like I got chills saying that, like this
Love that.
blanket of like dark night sky that's just like observing everything, observing the stillness, kind of giving this like nurturing to everyone and allowing
Mm-hmm.
everyone, giving literally everyone permission to rest.
Mm-hmm.
And
I
then
love that.
because of that, like still open, receptive foundation, through that, when the moon's done her time, she can just slowly leave. And then the masculine starts to rise up and the sun starts to rise up. And it's like with gratitude for what the moon has given him, and the sun's
Mm-hmm.
able to rise and wake everyone up and put everyone into that energy. And it's just the same thing. It's a cycle. Imagine
Mm-hmm.
if one day the sun was like, no, you need to stay longer, I don't want to come up. Or imagine if the moon was like, why do I have to do this? Like, you should be the one watching over people at night. Like, it just wouldn't work. Like,
I love that comparison.
there's no positive and negative to it. It's just neutral. To me, it's such a
Mhm.
natural way of things. And it's like, people can be so like anti this, but I think you just have to question, like, why are you so against this? Like,
Mhm.
even with other elements, like the sea, the ocean to me is like feminine energy, because it's water,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
fluid, and it's so vast. Like, the ocean never apologizes for its grandeur. It's never told to shrink itself. Like, when it crescendos and crashes against the shore, it's so powerful, but it's also so open and vulnerable. And then
Mhm.
like the thing upon which it lays is the land, is the solid foundation, is the rootedness, is the trees, is the like age old structure that's never leaving. And it's like, all of those things need each other and need those energies. Like, they're not there by chance, they're there because like they have deep wisdom and energies rooted in them. And it is this
Mhm.
masculine and feminine energy. Like, that's literally the origin of everything, whatever your beliefs are, spiritual, religious, doesn't matter, it's the origin of everything. So
Yeah, I love that so much. And I love the comparison like between the sun and the moon and also the sea. And it reminds me of, again, something that I read recently about, well, when you spoke about like the manifestation part of it and like the masculine and feminine energy in relation to those two, it reminded me about something that I read. And it was also comparing like, yeah, nature with masculine and feminine energy. And I think it's so beautiful. It's just such a beautiful reminder of like the the powerful the powerful universe that we live in. And I think when I think about Mother Nature, which is literally like the divine feminine, I was
mm,
thinking about this the other day about how like unappreciated that she is so much in today's society. And if you even just something as simple as like rubbish that you see left on the streets or left out in nature and stuff that people just discard, and it makes me think about how I think I made a post about this on my stories like recently. It just made me think about how like neglected she is. And I feel like that says a lot about people's own relationships with their feminine energy as well.
definitely.
And I
Wow.
think when they when you come back to your own feminine energy and appreciate your innate feminine energy, then you will also appreciate like Mother Nature that's around you. And I think again, it was something that I read about how like the cyclical nature of Mother Nature, and how everything is just cyclical, and everything like even with the yin and yang, and like the moon, the sun rising, and like the sun going down, and the moon rising and the moon going down, all this kind of stuff. It's such a beautiful cycle and a beautiful dance. And I feel like you could also apply it to like the menstrual cycle as well,
Mm.
and the rise and falls in that. And I think that in itself is, we could talk about do a whole other episode on
Yeah,
that. But
definitely, I
I
think
think
we'll
the,
have
the
to.
cycle the cycle in itself is something that again a lot of us nowadays, a lot of women nowadays just are not are disconnected from. And when you connect back with that innate part of yourself, like, oh, it's so empowering and
Mm.
so freeing, and there's so much wisdom that lies in it as well.
Mm. There's so much wisdom in our wombs. Like, it's just crazy. But ultimately, it's like, they don't want us connected to our bodies. They don't want us connected to nature. They don't want us to recognize that we are nature, because then we would know like the full throttle force of our power. Because if we really knew that, we would be unstoppable. And it's like,
Mhm.
I think that plays a huge part in disconnecting us from our masculine and feminine energies. So before we go, because we don't have that long left, but I do want to talk a little bit about um the fact that we are so out of tune with our cycles and our bodies. And I just want to talk about like, how can we get back in tune with them? Like, for someone who maybe doesn't even know that they're out of tune with it, like someone who just wouldn't necessarily think that they are, but maybe they're listening to this and they're thinking, oh, actually, like, it sounds like maybe I am in some aspects, but I just don't know. Like,
Mhm.
what would you maybe like give them to start to come back in tune with it?
Okay, so like if I could give tips or like guidance on that, one thing that I would say first and foremost is during the time that you are bleeding, really just consciously take the time to slow down and connect with your body, connect with your blood, if that's something that you feel called to. Because I know sometimes people can be a bit like, oh, that's a bit extreme, you know, like touching your blood or like looking at your blood or things like that. But if you feel called to, you know, do that. And I mean, I could go on a whole tangent about how so many of us have been, you know, when it comes to like your periods, think back to like when you were in school and you like had to go to the toilet and like change your pad or change your tampon. I feel like it was such a hushed thing that you would just like try and hide away. And I think there's so much shame in like the blood and in the bleeding, but really there's no shame at all in it. Okay. Yeah, what I would say, like, first thing is, if you want to connect back to it during the times that you're bleeding, during the days that you're bleeding, really consciously give yourself permission to slow down, because it literally is like an energetic release, it's a physical release, and you know, it can take it out on you. So really just honor yourself by maybe creating some self-care practices during maybe the first day, the first 2 days, whatever feels best for you, because obviously everyone experiences their period differently, and you know, some people might have energy during their periods and other people might be completely wiped out. So really just, you know, listen to your body and listen to what your body wants and needs during those days. And then if you don't already, invest in maybe some kind of like period tracker app, or even just use like your calendar on your phone, so you know when you first got your bleed, and then you can track the rest of your cycle, and then obviously when you next get your bleed. And also just be aware of the different phases of your cycle. Now obviously this can be like a whole other, like, you know, podcast episode breaking down the cycle in itself, but just know that the period also isn't the main event of the cycle. It's actually ovulation, and that's the most important part, and that's the part which actually tells you that you are like healthy, you are well, you know, you are fertile, all that kind of stuff. So just because you're bleeding, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have like a healthy cycle and stuff. So yeah, just be extra mindful on those days that you're bleeding, but also mindful across the month on how your energy feels, how your body feels, how your mindset is, all these kind of like little things, because they will change day to day. And that is also absolutely fine as well. So, you know, during those days when your energy is lowest, don't be hard on yourself, and don't be frustrated and be kind of like, oh, you know, push through it. Just really just sit and give yourself permission to, you know, lean back a little bit, have some extra self-care time, and just kind of sit with yourself and be like, okay, you know, why am I feeling like this? But do it in a way that isn't do you know when sometimes you feel a certain way, and maybe it is that you feel low energy or you feel a bit like shitty and you're just having like a down day? I feel like it's so easy to get in your head about it and be like, why am I feeling like this? Like, what is the root cause of this? And that in itself can lead to so much frustration. But
definitely.
just get curious about anything and everything that you're experiencing, and you know, make notes of it, be mindful of it, and just be open to, you know, receiving different messages, different things that come through in your like head and through your body, through your period, because your period in itself, the way that you experience it, whether it's through pain, whether it's through heavy bleeding or like long bleeding, these are all, you know, indicators that there might be things that are imbalanced or balanced. And what I love is that in Chinese medicine, they literally say that period pain is not normal. Like, you shouldn't be experiencing period pain. But unfortunately in society today, it has been normalized because it's so common for people to experience, that it's just like, oh yeah, period pain's a given, or oh yeah, you must suffer during your period. But that narrative isn't helpful at all, because it continues to create this idea that, like, you know, we must suffer on our periods, and that periods suck. But it's just like, no, they don't suck. And you know, I really wish that everyone who gets a period just has a beautiful experience of it.
And a good relationship with it as well, because I feel like
Yeah.
our ancestors used to like have such like like sacred rituals surrounding their periods and just their cycles in general. So maybe that's another thing people could do, is like throughout each like phase of your cycle, which again we probably need to do a whole other podcast on that, but obviously like throughout the 4 main stages of your cycle, like you could maybe have like a ritual for each of them. It could be something literally like, on the first day of my period, I sit and drink like a hot chocolate or a hot tea and just sit with it and just speak my intentions into the tea. And then in your ovulation phase, it could be something as simple as like, I just like write affirmations onto a piece of paper and speak them in front of the mirror, or I do a manifesting ritual, and just like really small things that will help you connect you back to your body. Like even if you don't necessarily feel it straight away, or even if you kind of are thinking, oh, I don't know if this is working, I don't know what this is doing, like ultimately try and put the mind aside and just focus on how something feels in the moment. Like, does it feel good? Does it feel nourishing? Does it feel like it's helping this specific part of your cycle? And if so, why not just do that and just like connect your lineage in that way, in a modern way, in a way that fits in with this world? Like, because they would be so proud of you. Like ultimately they recognize that, you know, the practices that our ancestors did 200 years ago was different to what they did 1,000 years ago. They're obviously not going to be the same, but it's just coming back to yourself, like doing something for yourself that's going to connect you back to your body.
I love that. And I love what you said as well about getting out of your head and like connecting back into your body, because again, bringing back feminine and masculine energy to that, like, you know, the head and logic and the mind is the masculine, and being in touch with your body and literally feeling that is the feminine, and that's what it's all about.
And just to give it something maybe for men listening, if you guys are out there, not to sound like the feminists who just drop in the statistics about men, but I feel like we have said stuff in this episode that's really useful to both men and women. But do you have any like advice on how like maybe men could connect back to their bodies and their rhythms? Because obviously it's so different to ours, like unimaginably different. But like any, obviously not from the experience of from a male experience, but just from your own knowledge, like what would you maybe say that could help men connect back to their bodies, for example?
I mean, I think with anyone, not just men, but also women, like connecting back to your breath and like being conscious of your breathing is a huge thing. And it has obviously like so many health benefits as well. And, you know, like so many of us are not breathing properly because of, you know, sat working at a desk, at offices all day and just being in a very, very stressed state. So really just being aware of your breath, you know, putting your hand over your stomach and just taking some deep breaths, like that's like a really big thing. And also, again, this isn't necessarily just for men, but you know, women can do it as well, but also men can. I'm a huge advocate on like dancing, you know, having daily boogies every single day. And I think for men, that can be a great way of connecting with your feminine energy, because when you dance, you're like moving freely and, you know, like flowing however you want. So I think that's also a really, really good way of doing so as well. But yeah, it's tricky because again, like I'm not a man, so I can't really speak from male experiences, but they're like two like very simple and easy things that I would say for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I think I would say as well, like something as simple as like doing something for yourself, especially if you are like connected to your masculine energy and you're kind of like in this energy of like providing and giving and things like that. Like also making sure you take time that you don't get burnt out, and like coming back to yourself and
So
filling
true.
up your cup so that you can give to others, whether that's your family, your relationship, your work, your projects, your craft, like whatever it is, like finding something for you, like actively seeking something for you, whether it's a hobby, a creative outlet, just like a game, like literally whatever it is, something that you do where you feel like you're maybe not constantly giving. And then also like finding, like, I mean, let's say finding friends. I'm sure like men listening have friends. They're like, who do you think we are? But like maybe like people that you can be open and vulnerable with, and not necessarily sit and cry for hours and talk about, like, you don't have to sort of sit around a campfire and be like, this doesn't leave here, this stays with us. But like just that you can just be open and yourself with, and that you don't have to like put on a facade with or something.
I love that.
so just before we go, I remembered last time with my guest episodes, I used to ask some like final quick fire questions, and I wasn't going to do them, but I thought it'll be interesting to see what you say now, even though I don't remember what you said before, but obviously it will be
No, same.
different. I might just go back to the last episode just to the end to see what you said. So it'll be interesting to like hear what you say now. So I'll just do those and then I'll pull a card and then yeah, that'll be it. So the first one is, how do you want to look back on your life in 70 years?
In 70 years. Oh, that's
Yeah,
so
because we're gonna live that long.
yeah, we are. Look back on, I think I think what I would love to do is, because I want children in the future and stuff. And I would love to look back, at this age, look back on my children and hopefully maybe even grandchildren, and just feel proud for the, I guess, wisdom that I passed on.
Oh my God. I
And
think you said,
like,
now you're saying it, I'm sure you said something similar last time, which is so
that would
cool.
be so weird if I did.
I just got chills. I think you did. Wow.
That would be so weird if I did. And just kind of like, yeah, that wisdom and just the feeling of just being, I don't know, like being
Mm,
connected to yourself. And
love that.
yeah.
What do you want people to know that would make them live their fullest expression now?
um uh, um like, nothing, literally nothing matters. Nothing matters. And like, you might get in your head about what other people think about you and being like, oh, they're judging me, or like all this kind of stuff, but seriously, they're not. Like, they're so caught up in their own lives
Mm,
that, like, no one cares.
yeah.
Like, literally no one cares. So just
Mm.
do what you want to do.
What does being present mean to you?
um just being I can't think of the word, but being so overly aware of like your surroundings in a certain moment, but also like your body and your energy and how everything feels, and just being very connected to
Mm.
everything around you in that certain moment, and being at peace.
And what are 3 words that define your current experience? Whether that's this moment, your life in general, anything that comes to mind, just 3 words that really hit the spot.
Um, um, Unapologetic. Um, I don't know why the word spicy came into my head, but spicy.
Why not? I love it.
And fun.
Love that. And are there any, like, I think you mentioned like a book earlier that you were reading. I think it's about like masculine and feminine energy or something. Because my last question is like, if you have any books or quotes or anything that like has really stood out for you or that you're resonating with, or
Okay,
if
so
nothing comes to mind, that's
I
okay
can't
as
think of
well.
the
You can
quote,
let
but
me know and I can
I
put it
have
in the
got the book
description.
here, the book that I
Oh,
referenced.
amazing.
I don't have a quote, and it is called The Path of Femininity. And it's so funny because if you see it, you might read it being like, the path of femininity, like, what does that mean?
Mm,
Like, trying to, oh, like a lady. But no, it's all about connecting back with your feminine energy. And one part that really stood out to me was the relationship you have with your own masculine and feminine energies. And there was an exercise in the book where the woman basically said, write a letter to your inner masculine and inner feminine energies. And
oh,
it really
wow.
stood out to me. And it like, there was a part that I read as well that really made me realize my own kind of like wounds that I carry and have
Mm,
carried. And that really, like, stood out to me and stuff. But yeah, The Path of Femininity, really great book.
I love that. And just if you want to let people know like where they can find you, like anything that you're working on or that you're doing right now that you want people to know about that they can join in any case.
Mhm. So I am mostly active on Instagram, and my username is She the Force. And at the minute, I am doing twice monthly de-stress and dance classes, which is a chance for you to move, dance, connect with your body, connect with your energy, and just kind of de-stress your whole body. And that's kind of the main thing that I'm doing at the minute. But I always have lots of ideas for things to things to do. But yeah, that's where I share most things.
I love that. So really quickly, if you have a second, I pulled 3 cards. I pulled one for the masculine, one feminine, and one for like the unity of both. And the one I pulled for the feminine is rise, which is interesting because I feel like that's what you might think would come up for the masculine, but it's saying like the journey can be the destination. A rise can also be a fall. Don't give in to corruption of your truest self. Trust the climb and don't lose sight of yourself, which I think is everything we were talking about for connecting to your feminine energy. The one I picked for the masculine was oblivion.
Oh,
And it's saying absence is a void that you might wish to escape. Looking within can freeze one with fear. However, within oblivion, there could be a path undiscovered. You are your own way, which I think that's really cool because it gives this like empowering message for the masculine energy of like, you, if you're without this energy, like if you have this absence of this energy, you just can find yourself in this like purposeless void. And so don't spend too much time like going within, questioning, being too airy fairy, just like get out, try things and connect to that energy. And then the one I picked for both, this is amazing. Look at the picture for this.
oh, I love
But
it.
that's
Literally what we
literally
were
what we were
speaking about.
talking about, like the
I love
sun,
that.
the moon. Oh my God, it's literally amazing. And it's transition and it's saying evolve with the shifting road, motion and stagnation, embrace transition, don't fall behind the ever turning cycle of day and night. Resist and the wheel may crack, sending you out of the order of things and deep into despair. Lean into the corners of the road. Oh my God, I
Love
wish
that.
everyone could see that because it's literally like everything we were talking about. On one side is like the moon, the night setting. On the other side is the sun rising, and then like this tree flourishing in between. So I love that so
Definitely
much.
send me those pictures.
I
Send me the pictures.
will. Thank you so much for joining. And I'm sure we'll have a part 3 and 4 and 5.
100%. Yeah, I was gonna say part 3 and 4 and 5.
Thank you so much for coming
Thank
on.
you. It's been fun.